All right, so let me go ahead and get started and welcome everybody. Good morning, all. People are probably going to be coming in as we get going here at the beginning of the day here on the West Coast. So cheers for everybody. Grab your coffee and we'll settle in here and have a quick conversation about some of the advantages and concerns of a Baldrige award process that's going to be more results focused, I think, going forward. So let me put up our slides here. Um, this is meant to be somewhat of a presentation, about 20 to 30 minutes, and then really some open discussion around people that are working in the field and some of their inputs as well. We, like everybody else, we PNW, like everybody else, is trying to figure out what this is going to be and trying to make sense of it all and how it's going to impact our regional program. But we do have some thoughts, I think, to share, at least on where we are in the middle of all that, sorting through and getting acquainted with the new process. So here is the slide deck that we're going to have today. I will make this available afterward as well. If you've ever had one of those mornings where you open up your file and it's corrupted and you're supposed to present in about 30 minutes, your heart beat races more than even the coffee that you're trying to sip on. So I was able to reconstruct this real quickly and get it put back together. Glad to have everybody here with us today. So the presentation that we're going to go over today really is more about a level set with what is the same and what's the change. So we're going to just real quickly go over that stuff. In case anybody was not able to join us a couple of weeks ago, we did start the conversation here and we're going to extend it into results. I'm going to do a little level setting there. We're going to talk about the benefits of what we think the results orientation will have on the program and on the process. And then we'll talk about the concerns and then talk about impacts for all stakeholders. And that's where we're going to really kind of listen and maybe learn from you all as you're digesting this work along the way. So what is the same is if you're new to these changes, the mission of the Baldrige program really remains unchanged, and we're getting very clear indications from them that that is the intent of what we're trying to do. So competitiveness, sharing best practices, making sure that we are acknowledging the organizations that are high performing and making sure that they're awarded properly. All of those things are really kind of the same. Still working towards the adoption of, again, leadership and management practices that have been proven over time, but yet being adaptive, I think, as part of this process goes forward. Core values are the same. And the Baldrige Excellence Framework is probably going to go under, I would guess, some reconstruction, as we now are working off of a little two resources. The framework was published again for 2023, 2024 last year. And then we had a supplemental resource that was available. So if anybody wants that supplemental resource, please put it in chat. I can also include that on the distribution after the session. But we're anticipating there's going to need to be some level of integration or more integration between what the new award process is and what the framework stands. They are standing apart right now, but we're anticipating they're going to be, with some improvement cycles, updated, as well as probably some further integration in as we go forward. For those of you, again, who are not familiar with the changes, the award criteria link will be here in the slides, so you can access it there as well. I can attach it if you need it. The focus really, from kind of in summary, that I would say to everyone is that the criteria is really narrowing down. So we're moving in this award process criteria. So if you are writing a Baldrige Award application nationally, you're responding to 8 different areas, as well as including your organizational profile. And just to summarize that real quickly and not spend too much time on it, they are essentially a really brief overview of about 1,000 to 2,000 characters, depending on what area you're filling in, and then your supplemental graphs and charts to kind of explain how you're doing. So the focus really has moved to the application focus of this process has really moved to sharing your results first. And think of it as being a traditional Baldrige application, just extracting categories 1 through 6 out of it. You would think that that would make it shorter as an application. That remains to be seen. We just started Baldrige training nationally last week. We do not have any applications in front of us yet. That'll happen in the first part of April. Actually middle of April, excuse me. And we'll be kind of taking a look at how long and how much information is actually in these new documents or in this new application process. It is online, so it's a little different for applicants. Now they're kind of plugging and playing their information into an online registry, if you will, or a database. And it is then assembling kind of the application for the examiners to take a look at using that database process. So it's going to look a little different. My conversations with people who have been exploring putting together the applications, they still believe there's probably going to be between probably 25 to 40 pages of information. The results section for a lot of national applicants usually tends to be about 25 pages anyway. So it would kind of be extracting a few summaries from those categories 1 through 6, putting all that together. But we're anticipating that the new application process nationally will be somewhere around the 25 to 40 page mark. I know that's kind of a big range, but we really don't know what we're going to see yet as we go forward. The application, the online process is really, again, more focusing on basic and the basic information and the key results. The process is also going to be driven by a new scoring rubric that we're just getting introduced to. And the intention of that scoring rubric, from what it looks like at first blush, is it is really there to identify best practices across sectors. And so we're looking for the highest results, sustained levels, trends, and comparisons for 5 years. And it's kind of like there's going to be a lot in the middle. There's going to be some that maybe don't have anything there that's most in the middle. And then there's going to be a few that are probably going to come out there with that national best practice kind of ranking. So they're really being a little more stringent to convert that into older terms or previous award terms. I would say we're going to be identifying probably those results that are in the 70 range and above. So there'll kind of be a big middle section probably of those older scores that were probably somewhere between 10 and 70, and then one kind of at the basic. So it's going to really kind of go end to end. The extreme people who don't have much at all, those extreme people who have a lot of stuff, and then a lot of people in the middle. So that scoring rubric is really going to be the new driver of the process. It's going to be evaluating those results, and then the examiners will be providing their feedback and rankings and conversations around consensus discussions for the judges using that rubric. The judges then, same process as before, will review the applicants at the national level and then sort through them and then offer a site visit list. There was a recent change, I think, since we did post this information and share it in early January. There still is a emphasis on identifying best practices. And so those could be still at play. We don't have all the details on what that's going to look like. But what I'm understanding is that there still will be a category best practice potential recognition as part of the application process. They had gone so far as to say finalists in the past, but they pulled that word back and are, I think, looking more at the best practices and trying to identify those organizations who are doing really well in individual categories along the way. More to see. We don't have a lot of details on that. So some of what I just said was my speculation. And but that's what we're anticipating, and that's kind of what we're hearing from the process. That's really going into this the top of this next slide, which that's one of those additional opportunities for recognition. There is a fast track process where organizations can not move through or have organizations that have either previously won or won one of our partner alliance awards um, are able to now do kind of a fast track process. They're trying to jumpstart. Baldrige is trying to kind of jumpstart this new, allowing some of the higher profile, larger organizations who are using the Drucker's index and also the Just Capital rankings. They're inviting them to kind of fast track through the process, and we'll see how many organizations take advantage of that. It doesn't remain. I don't have any indication on what the response has been from larger businesses who are in those indexes. But that was one of the strategies I think they were trying to design into this, was that kind of fast track. And if you're on one of those indexes at a certain level, you can put your eligibility in, and then they will look at it and then get back with you. And while I'm on that topic, there was also an extension of the application process to one more week. So the eligibility was extension 1 week further, and the application process was extended 1 week further. If you are in a situation where you might be writing applications, it's important to know that. So do check the website. It's been updated, and they have some more information on it there. Bottom line, excellence is still, I mean, the premise of this. We're still really trying to help organizations get better, as well as be more resilient and successful in the long term. And their desire to identify these organizations and to use them as role models, use them as examples that other organizations can follow, is still the change. So those are the things that are kind of a high overview of the changes. Let me stop there and just kind of, any questions around the new process or anything we could discuss as a group here real fast. Any other questions people have? That's an opportunity for me to wet the whistle and now dive into some of the reason why you're here, I think. The benefits and the results orientation. So we have now a customer group that is part of our board. That group is meeting and kind of digesting and actively thinking about what does this mean for our services and what does this mean for our organization. So I've kind of tried to extrapolate some of the things I've heard from there, add some of my own thoughts in. This is purely my opinion, and I would love to hear other people's thoughts around this on both the benefits and the potential concerns. But what PENW is thinking is that as we're looking at more of a results oriented program, we think it's going to allow us to actually go in and engage with organizations more directly around category 7 first. And so a lot of organizations will come to us very interested in Baldrige and improvement. And we don't always start, our lead questions usually aren't around results. We usually don't dive into that first. But we've been really exploring, what that could mean. And we think that there could be some increased efficiency and productivities for organizations that are really asking themselves the question, whether they're in the early stages of getting going, in the middle stages, or even advanced stages. What are we really focused on, and what are those results providing us as far as prioritization and making sure that our resources are aligned in the right places? So we do believe that organizations that can get more quickly to their key or most key results may actually be able to start marshaling their resources and tasks and priorities a lot better. We're also believing that maybe for organizations, the enhanced accountability of this could also lead really more to a sense of ownership in the process, both for leaders and employees. So the faster they can actually make that connection, it kind of links back to the fourth bullet about clear expectations. What I've found in doing this work with organizations is that a majority of the time, everybody wants to come to work and do a good job, and they just want to know what it is that they can do to help. And organizations always don't have processes in place, to do that very clearly. So we do think that this results orientation will at least start to describe what good looks like, or say we need to be working on these 5, these 10, these 20, whatever the organization would put forth. those measures. So the accountability to those measures, as well as the clearer performance expectations and kind of what the employees might be thinking, we think could be enhanced through this process. Maybe most importantly, I'm thinking bullet 3 may actually have the most impact, in my personal opinion, around this, which is really getting data driven to senior leaders tables more consistently, and hopefully is going to be more embedded into their processes, and really driving them to think about things strategically and operationally and make better choices around the decisions that they are making. So with that enhanced data availability, the decision making could be impacted. And then lastly, this is kind of one that, if you've been in the Baldrige community, we've always been focused on improvement. We've probably for the last 15 to 20 years been more emphasis on the innovation side of things. And innovation is kind of one of those words that, as times evolved, it starts to sound a lot like improvement. It starts to actually ask a lot of questions. But what we're really thinking here is that maybe for organizations, as they are going through their results and they're paying very close attention to what it is, and they're finding that they have goals that are more elusive, it may actually point those things out to them more clearly, and it could actually drive them towards some more creative solutions, or at least reprioritizing resources and really focusing them on the things that, if you need to improve a financial measure and it needs to be a big change, or if you need to work on your workforce or customers or whatever it is that would be for that organization, and you've not been able to crack it, it's consistently there, it may actually drive you more to a conversation around what role could innovation play in your organization moving forward and addressing that issue. So there's a couple of thoughts around the benefits. Reactions, anybody, agreement, disagreement? This is really meant to be an open discussion. So any thoughts on that from anyone?
Yeah, I think your summary here, it does make sense. I think it could, especially perhaps drive some thoughts towards greater innovation.
It does. I
Really,
mean, I think
really emphasize it. Yeah.
I think it could, and this really probably gets really a focus. What I see the connection to is really a strong connection to 4. So our measurement structures, how we're analyzing information as an organization and performance, and then how we're generating decisions from that and improvements, and then also warehousing that data and using it to leverage, future activities. I think it really puts a lot of emphasis on category 4 in the new system, and then thus that, I think, feeds category 7. So the data and results sections, I think, really get. And so what impact that could have on both improvement and innovation, obviously remains to be clear. But I've always felt like the connection between strategy and 2, and how are you identifying opportunities for innovation, could actually be impacted positively by this focus as well. So some of
Yes.
those ideas.
Agreed.
Other thoughts?
Darren,
This is, sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I have some strong concerns about this because I worked for several publicly traded companies that had strong results, but it was as a result of a very effective people beating process.
People beating?
Yes, people beating
Gotcha.
process.
Yeah.
That there was no interest by the executives in creating systematic processes that ensured the results were sustainable. It
Yeah.
was about creating a toxic culture
I think that's fair.
where there was an expectation that these results would be achieved. And if not, there were consequences to pay. So I was a little bit relieved the other day when Bob Fangmeyer addressed during week 1 examiner training that during the site visit processes would in fact be explored. But without that, I I think we can easily turn into rewarding the guys that know how to dance the waltz to Wall Street.
I don't disagree. And you know, Kay, I think it remains to be seen if that will be embraced or not, in my own opinion, because I think that is the rub. It's actually a great segue into, you know, the drawbacks. And so I'm happy. Well, I'm just going to follow that discussion and start to pull some of those forward because I think it is, I think it has those same kinds of, you know, concerns. And so as we start to think about this, through the new lens and organizations are coming to me. We've got a couple of organizations that are just getting started. And this is one thing that we're really trying to emphasize with them is balance amongst stakeholders. And so just because you're winning in one category or you're winning with one measure doesn't mean you're having adverse impacts on or unintended consequences on other measures. So yeah, to your point, Kay, you can drive to that financial return or drive to that product quality, you know, measure, but what are you doing to get there and what is its impact? And so having a more well-rounded conversation about focus on employee well-being and I think other stakeholders, I think become, you know, part of the discussion that we're going to have to figure out. It'll be easier probably to get to site visit potentially if you have great results. And what we've heard, I don't know that they've landed on the exact answer, but only a subset of the team is going to be going to the site visit. I heard as few as 1 or 2 people. I've heard other people say 3 to 4. And it will be really, really a curious conversation to see how effectively a smaller group of people can spread out across an organization and ascertain some of those nuances that you're talking about, Kay. So how are they interfacing with the workforce? What are the impacts on the customers? How's that impacts partners, stakeholders, and, you know, other people in the system? It'll be a concern, I think, of the new process, and hopefully senior leaders aren't really putting a lot of pressure on employees and thus impacting, you know, well-being. We also believe that that can stifle creativity and collaboration because we know when we get myopic and we lose that systems, we're doing everything to, you know, push the lever to whatever, you know, point we need it to be at, but we're probably creating a lot of ripple effects in the organization that we either are aware of or not aware of. And so that intense focus, I think, on achieving a single outcome or moving a single measure could stifle creativity and collaboration, probably more so collaboration, I think, in the organization. We also know that when senior leaders sometimes get their compensation on the line and unethical things can start to happen because we want to protect our own interests. And there are some things where goals, you know, that are ambiguous may lead to some, you know, cutting across or cutting across corners, manipulating data, and some of those things as well. So we're really concerned that there could be some unethical. So those ethical systems inside the organization and how we assess those in leadership and also in governance could become very, very important site visit questions as we get going. Also, the reduced focus on learning and development. So for me, my reason why I got into this work and started doing this was really around the learning and development and the piece of it, investing in people and bringing them along within the organization to really have both people's careers and the organization win. And there could be, as these things get implemented, less of a focus on learning and development and less of a focus on organizational learning. We don't want to be breaking it down into single, you know, functions and pieces. That's not, I think, an intention of the award. And so we'll have to be, I think, concerned about that. And then the internal increased competition and conflict that could come along as well. I'm going to clean these slides up. I'm sorry, as I'm seeing them up here, I had to replace some graphics on my damaged file, and I think I got a little overlap here, so I'll clean that up when I get them sent out. But Kay, does that fully expand, I think, on some of your concerns about being too results oriented? I'd be curious to see what others had to say as well. But anything else?
No, thanks.
Greg?
Darren, yeah, I just wanted to kind of amplify on those thoughts because it really appears to me the script has just been flipped 180 degrees from looking at process and systems. And then we would really do a deep dive on those and then try to correlate that with results. Here, as you've already pointed out, we're going to start by looking at the results, regardless of the processes. Hopefully, underneath, there are some thoughtful, well-designed, sustainable processes that others could learn from. But in today's environment, it's going to be even more difficult to discern that. One area I really wanted to highlight, though, is going to be strategic planning, adaptation, and innovation, because things are changing minute by minute in the workplace, particularly with some of the technological advances and artificial intelligence. And what works today may not work tomorrow. So I think the process is definitely going to be interesting, but it seems that it's become laser focused on where you are today and how you're performing today. So I'm not sure how all that's going to play out. I assume you're going to talk about the role of the alliance programs and try and get back to some of the basics.
Well, thank you for the segue, because I think that's exactly it is a head scratcher, and I would be lying to you if I didn't say I was when I hear the information coming from Baldrige and I hear them to say alliance members, stay the course and keep doing the same things that you've been doing, and yet we've got this different process at the national level. What the experience is going to be for the customers. So if we are staying the course at the PENW alliance level, and we're still preaching systems, we're preaching processes, we're preaching improvements, we could be the growth for those systems to eventually mature and go to the national level. But if you're new to the process, you're not going to have that understanding, which I think you're talking about, Greg, and you're going to laser in on those results, and you're going to think this is a results-oriented process, and that could impact, and that's going to be something we see as a big concern as PENW, is how do we temper a little bit of that expectation, and how do we know that these results are achieved over time, and that we want them to be sustainable and serve the organization well, for longer periods of time. And Greg, the thing that you did say about, this today, it does put a lot of focus on today. However, the results orientation that they're asking for in the application is 5 years minimum. So they have kind of prescribed that, from what I understand. And they're really looking at 5 years of trended performance moving in the right way, and then achieving high levels of comparison. At least that's what we've been told. We haven't seen that in action yet, but that, in theory, would temper a little bit of that. You got to get it done today, and you just got this number last month, so you must be really good. You're going to need to have 5 years of data, which does kind of slow that down a little bit, and kind of get people thinking a little more longer term, and maybe thinking more process, we hope. But it kind of remains to be seen. Reactions to that? Does that hit the mark, Greg, for you? Or
Yeah, that's very helpful. I think the longer term perspective will blunt some of the impact.
they're going to be, yeah, I think, competing and maybe creating more noise. And who knows, we might be challenging our systems to be thinking about some things differently. It feels to me, in the new environment, that we're not seeing organizations that have sustainability for longer periods of time, that it is more elusive. people are achieving it for a while, people are leaving the organization, they're building, and then we're seeing it, fall back down, which does reinforce the need for, systems and processes and things that are in the organization, and an operating framework that, they could employ on. But investing the time and energy into do that still is something that a senior leadership team has to be very much committed to doing, and very much has to be seeing the results on, I think, earlier in the process to understand where it can go. So we're kind of struggling with that with our customer group. We're just getting back into looking at, markets and reasons of why people are doing this, and working with folks. But we do have an idea, I should say, or an interest in how do we get an organization to see results more quickly? Because I think when you pull apart some of these things that are leading to these changes, is that a lot of organizations will stop the process because they're not seeing results quick enough. And so I think it is our challenge as the alliance programs to help organizations at least see the impact. They may not see the highest level of performance, early on, but at least if they can start to see things moving in the right direction, hopefully that will reinforce their learning, that'll reinforce their achievement, and then that could be expanded into other aspects of their operations. So we're trying to figure out how we might help organizations see more quickly, but yet also explain to them this is a very complex system and it's going to take some time to move all of the pieces. Any other thoughts from others on the call? So I think the implications really are, I mean, I did want to make this as much of a dialogue as it was a presentation. I'd like to learn from you what your concerns are around the process. That'll be helpful for us as we start to adapt and look at this. But I think the one thing we're trying to figure out as an alliance program is how much of this do we keep and how much of this do we change. And so we are going to be looking at our examination training and our process that we're doing here locally. We're also going to be looking at our application process and how we're taking in information. Are we still going to be requiring a 50-page application? Can we do it differently? Is there software that we could maybe leverage? Is there a way to do it a little differently that way? And then also kind of the overall reward and recognition systems. How do we really use the judges process and then use the recognition process to support organizational learning, sustainability, resilience, those kinds of things. But it is a little early to be seen, but I'd love to hear from other people. What are your biggest concerns about these changes? And do you see them being more positive, more negative, or have more concerns about them?
I think it's kind of a 50-50. As both Kay and Greg mentioned, there is certainly the risk of leadership just starting to refocus only on results. And yeah, in the end, they would probably do that anyway. As I understand it, one of the reasons that there was this shift in focus to more results oriented, it was hopefully an attempt to get more interest in from a lot of organizations,
Right.
And perhaps acquire more applicants. And hopefully, as they start the application process and they start going through all of the information and asking themselves all of these questions, hopefully they'll begin to realize that it's more than just the results. It is the processes and the sustainability and treating workforce properly and those sorts of things, and strategy, all of that. And perhaps that was the original intention of this change.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I think that there's, when you work with organizations that are trying to embrace this and are interested in doing it, you know, they don't want to hear always, you know, it's going to take a long time to get to where you want to go. They want to see, you know, quick results as fast as possible. And so I think that there are some dangers in this, because I think it does, when you get into it, you might start doing your application, you might start moving forward, and then you go, you know what, this is a lot of work. This is more than we expected. So as an alliance, you know, person and an executive director, I try to be as upfront with people as I can, which to say, you know, your organization's a very complex system. It's moving in a lot of different ways and in a lot of different processes and a lot of different systems. And so understanding all of that and getting all of that aligned and integrated and moving in the right direction is going to take some time. And it does have a little bit of the changes have a little bit of a microwave feel to them. You know, if we just put it in the microwave and turn it on high, you know, can we get what we want real fast and then pull it out and gobble it down and you know, move on to the next thing. And I think that there is some danger in that as well.
This is Margaret, and I have a question or so.
Yeah.
I was wondering if they told you how the process evolved with the consulting firm on how they came up with these, you know, the revised criteria and emphasis points.
I don't know that the report has been shared widely. It's not like on the website. We just really got more the conclusions of the process along the way. But I do know that there were lots of stakeholders involved. I know they talked to the Baldrige consulting community, who's been around for a long time. They spoke to former winners. They spoke to people who actually got close and gave up or didn't move forward. They also talked to organizations that were not even interested. So it seemed like they did a nice job of trying to gather inputs. How that was all synthesized and how they came up with this, I'm not completely clear on, Margaret, but I do know that the legislation that was signed in 1987 was always kind of the reference point on the wall, which is the reason why we're here as a Baldrige community, is to increase competitiveness and effectiveness of organizations, and to identify those who are high performers and doing well, and then share their best practices along the way. So I think those two things remained unchanged. I think this was, you know, feedback from the examiner community, feedback from the judges community, all of the customers in the process. And you're looking at I mean, some of the upside, again, we haven't talked about. It looks like the application process should be simpler in theory. I think
That would be great.
it might be rough for people the first time, because they're reformatting. Maybe if they've been in the process in the past, now they have to reformat what they've normally been using and maybe make some changes to that and present it in a little different way. So that could be a little more time consuming until they figure it out. But it, at the national level, is a lot less information. So you should have a lot less in time, you know. I'm going to guess many of us on this call probably have had some either direct writing responsibilities. And we know from doing this work, it is, you know, an organization can put thousands or hundreds of, maybe even thousands of hours into putting that together. And that should be, you know, cut back. The examiner process, from what we can tell, at least on this round, appears to be somewhere in the neighborhood of a 50% reduction in time. So we're going to be asking for less from examiners. The thing I find as an alliance member hard, it's harder to recruit examiners today than I think it might have been 25 years ago. I happened to work for an organization who was on the Baldrige journey, and my job was to actually do this inside of organizations. I don't see as many positions like that today as I saw, you know, back then. And so I think this allows more professionals that are not necessarily quality oriented or other professionals, I think, to get involved, because the time commitment we're talking about is roughly about 50% of the time. So we'll see how that stacks up. We'll see how that works as they start to roll it out. But those changes of easier application, easier for the examiners, hopefully still getting the high performing organizations and recognizing them to the top of the chain, those still kind of remain unchanged. But how they got to determining these were the processes, I think there was a lot of division around it. I know I talked to a lot of people about it, and there were other changes that I think people would have liked to have seen in the process as well.
Thank you.
Darren, this is Greg. When I worked for Joint Commission, we heard this all the time. Show me the evidence. Show me the evidence that what you're asking us to do makes a difference. So I don't know where in one's thinking about correlating Baldrige process with outcomes and showing hard evidence that it makes a difference. And, I think in today's world, with as much information as is available out there, that there are other avenues to look for evidence as to what produces results. So have you heard any thought about how can we validate that this makes a difference?
Oh, that exact question came up in examiner training to Bob, and I don't know that I heard a great answer, but I think the question was rephrased slightly different, Greg, to say, how much confidence do you have that this process is actually going to, bridge the gap and meet the mark? And there's a little bit of off absolute unknown, I think is the real answer. I don't know that they have, nor do I think in some ways that's a fair question. I think it is for us to figure out, maybe through doing. But it is, it almost makes you though wonder, hopefully there are some critical success factors that are part of this change process within the Baldrige community that they are measuring and monitoring. One of them, I think, is going to be the response from larger companies, the response from manufacturers, which were two organizations that they were trying to get in. And to your point, Greg, I think what will it say to those companies that are not necessarily financially bottom line driven? Like nonprofits, like government, like education, in some ways like healthcare. We really, over the last 30 years, kind of moved away from big business and big organizations like that, and really moved into more of what I would call mid-sized organizations and organizations that were not publicly traded. And they're really going back to that. So I think it's going to be, some of that is going to be understood, I think, in the response from the communities and how much traction there is. It does make you wonder how, first of all, how you would measure it. And second of all, are they doing that work behind the scenes? Just on that point though, Greg, I do know that ASHE, the American College of Healthcare Professionals, executives, excuse me, they did an article somewhere in like the mid teens, I want to say 16, 17, 18. There was a couple of people inside of that organization that actually produced something that went out in the ASHE publication. I forget what the name of it is, but it did compare the norms and the norms of the industry to the award-winning healthcare organizations. And there was clearly a correlation between those that were using the framework and the average. So I do know it's been done in there, probably within the last 10 years, but I don't know of anything that has been done, for example, in the education sector. I do know, I'm going to probably not pronounce his name correctly, but Sharush Narodi. I know that's not right, so apologies to him. But I know he did some work on the East Coast. I think he was in the Georgia area, and he did a correlation between, I think, some stock indicators and the performance of some of the early winners when there was more big businesses involved, and that he was able to establish a correlation between using the framework and outperforming organizations as well. So it's not that it hasn't ever been done. And I think your point is that it needs to be done as we go forward. So I've really not heard any specifics around how they're planning on evaluating that, but I can't imagine that there's not a process to say, did we make this better, and are we moving in the right direction, or did we make it worse? The problem is that you only got probably one time to do this. If you do this and it doesn't go well, it could mean, I think it could mean very dire things for this process, because I think people will start to lose faith in it. And I think that could have a negative impact.
Yeah, I think the other challenge is COVID to me represents a black hole in time and space.
It does.
And anything prior to COVID.
Greg, you froze there, so I'll try to finish the sentence I think you were moving toward, which was we are in a different environment. I mean, it's almost as if you take your process improvement, change of theory, and you draw your line right there and say, this was the environment before, now this is the environment after, and the results maybe aren't comparable. Maybe they need to be looked at, independently. As we go forward, because I think COVID impacted especially healthcare more than any other industry. I mean, it was just devastating for many people, financially and workforce wise. Any other thoughts or concerns on the new process and how you think it might play out as a customer? I really am interested if there are people that are thinking about getting involved and hearing this for the first time, or if there's people who are wanting to volunteer, maybe become examiners. Does this impact, how does it impact, I guess, your interest maybe in the process or in the framework? Anything like that to share?
I think that remains to be seen. And I think Bob Fagmeyer's been really good about reminding all of us, and I include myself in his plea, that for those of us who have been doing this for a long time, who were really wedded and committed to the old process, we have to suspend that belief for this time period and really give this new process a fair shake. And that requires us to make sure there's absolute fidelity in the process, that we don't try to backslide or undermine it by going through what is old and familiar. And I count myself among those who are potentially guilty. So I'm trying to be very rigorous in following what the new process is, because that's the only way we'll know whether it's a better process, or at least as good a process, if we're true to the design of it.
Yeah. And learning is probably harder than,
Oh,
or unlearning is probably harder than learning, right? And so being able to suspend like that is not easy to do, because you've got this connection and this experience that you're drawing from that kind of informs, how you might problem solve and, go forward. And so we don't have that or we're going to have less of that, I think, in this new process. So it is a concern. I think that people are going to be pulled back into the other. What I can say on behalf of PNW's work, I was part of some of the initial conversations in 2017 and 18 around a new examiner process. We weren't touching the application process or anything else at that point. And some of the work that came out of that to simplify examiners' work and reduce time, and I think make it a little cleaner and less rework and more efficient, I felt like we're moving in the right direction. We did some site visits here within PENW with examiners that used the new format kind of feedback writing, and they responded very positively. The ones that did it before in the changes and the ones who had not done it ever before, and this was their first time, they did feel like it was from the feedback from the examiner's role to the what does this mean for feedback and how do we present this in an easy to understand way. They felt like it was much more straightforward and less circuitous, because I think the old feedback reporting of like the somewhere around 2000, maybe 7 to 14 or something around in there, the feedback just got behemoth. I mean, it was sentences were, 40 words and whole paragraphs, on OPs and strengths. And I mean, they were just hard to digest. I do think that this new format is going to keep us more in the bullet environment, if you will, or the old USA Today, trying to make some real brevity to it. The question will be is, does that provide organizations still with the amount of information that they need to know where to make changes and to where they're going to find the levers in the feedback report remains to be seen. We'll have to keep after that. So we're nearing the end of the session. I do appreciate everybody making the hour to come and share your thoughts, hopefully take a few things away from these changes. We are going to be moving 2 more conversations forward. We've just been trying to monthly have a new topic. Next month, we are going to talk about community engagement and the Communities of Excellence process. And that's a little bit of a new topic, not necessarily related to the changes, but it happens to be the newest part of the award program. It was accepted in 2023, I believe, as a program, and part of the Baldrige family of programs, and is going to be rolling out. It's a very interesting process if you're involved in a community situation. Getting organizations across sectors and across time and distance to work together is a challenge. So we're going to talk more about that in April, and then in May, I'm hoping to share with you our experience through the examiner process and what some of the indicators might be around that. So we'll be finishing up our applications at the Baldrige level around the 1st of June, we're now told. But by May, we think we're going to be able to at least share some insights with you as to how the process is working so far, and probably some of the strengths and opportunities as we keep going forward. So thanks for joining us this morning. I will be following up with all of you, sharing a video link to this as well as the presentation slides. So have a great rest of your Thursday. But before I go, any closing comments or questions we need to address? All right, hearing none. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday, and please keep in touch for more information from PENW, and join us if you're interested in having more conversation about this down the road. So take care, everyone.
Darren.
Thank you.